Okay. As they say, social distancing and hygiene will help save lives. So I just wish that we could all meet together, but maybe next year, as Sebastian said. Okay, let me then go directly into the theme. As Latif mentioned, cross-border corridors for 5G for connected and automated mobility are extremely important, politically important. As you see, they already bring to the table substantial funding, and I will try to put this in an IoT context and then focus on the challenges for the future. A brief outline. As I said, I will try to set vehicles as a smart thing. Except that they usually carry people and which carry their own connected smart things. So this interaction is one of the critical issues. The whole point of 5G for connected and automated mobility is to go beyond best effort that we have today to deliver mission critical services. I will mention the three ongoing cross-border corridor projects and the four new ones that are going to be launched before the end of the year, which again represent an investment of over 100 million euros, so quite substantial. And then we look forward towards deployment in cross-border corridors across Europe in the context of the next framework program to be funded under the CEF Digital, where we hope to go from the 100 million to a substantial bigger amount. The preparation for cross-border deployment involves a number of addresses a number of challenges that I will summarize, and then I will go into the conclusions. Vehicles are connected, multi-networked, multi-system, multi-domain, multi-many things, smart things, okay? And some of them are very nice, okay? I really like this picture. Vehicles are connected. They are connected in multiple ways for multiple purposes. For, as you see in the picture, for infotainment, but also for telematics, namely called also ITS services, and for V2X communication. This picture gives you an idea of all the sets of applications and contexts that can be covered through these means. But what is important to see here is that the vehicle interacts with the outside world, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, vehicle to infrastructure, vehicle to the cloud. But, and it's not mentioned in the picture, it connects to the people inside. It's not only with the people outside, with the people inside, and again, with their things. This picture gives you an idea of how the data generated by vehicles is then brought together in the broader context to the cloud, to the fog, and then eventually to institutional, to OEMs, to the mechanics. So this gives you an idea of the complexity, not only of the interaction of the vehicles themselves, but then with the rest of the world. This is not only a challenge, but is certainly a major opportunity. Okay, the connected car is exploding. It's something that started a while back, and I will come to this in a later slide. But by 2025, it is expected that almost 100% of the new cars, and I must emphasize new cars, will be connected, and that by 2035, 75% of the cars on the road will be somewhat, I need to add here, somewhat autonomous. They will not certainly be fully autonomous by 2035. There are some ideas from my dear friends from Berkeley say that not even by 2075 we will have a substantial number of fully autonomous vehicles. This is a big challenge, a big opportunity, and it involves a whole lot of players. Okay, obviously I'm not going to go into this detail. You'll have the copy of the presentation, but this again gives you an idea of the complexity. This is an open game with many players, many interested parties, and a lot of money at stake. Okay, all these people need to work together. Someone should turn the mic off, please.
Yes, so Jen, can you please mute yourself?
As I mentioned before, this evolution towards connected vehicles comes from a long time ago. We are now at the stage where V2X is starting to be deployed, and we are moving towards a mobility area focusing more and more on automation. But this gives you an idea of the various, I would call them generations, to use the same analogy as with the mobile, number of generations that preceded us, and it will eventually lead to this more autonomous era. With all these people that were mentioned before, all these players, there is a clear need for standards, okay? And again, this slide just gives you an idea in the context of IEEE of the number of standards involved, but there are many other institutions and SDOs involved. Unfortunately, I could not find any similar picture for this, but this gives you an idea of the amount of people that need to come together, and the objective is to have a consensus perspective and development. I already mentioned the opportunities. Here is the aspect of benefits. The benefits on the right side, you see the UK benefits just in the period 2014 to 2030. And it gives you 51 billion pounds, 320,000 additional jobs, 25 jobs in automotive manufacturing, 25,000 serious accidents prevented, and 2,500 lives saved just in the UK. But in general, the benefits of CV2X, cellular vehicle to everything, are well known, and this is a slide from Nokia that gives you an idea of the safety increase, reduction of fatal accidents due to human error. There are other types of accidents, but it also describes at the bottom the necessary connectivity that is required. And this means that we need to have CV2X coverage everywhere. Okay? But it's not only talking about benefits. We need to talk about risks, and this will link with subsequent presentation.
I tried to do an update or something, and then I wanted to cancel because it takes 1 hour, whatever, and then.
Please, can you mute yourself? Sorry, George.
It's okay. We need also to talk about risks. And the first one in this picture, I selected it because it tells you that there's a lot going on. And sorry for this, something is not going well. People will be overwhelmed with information, and people and systems themselves. And there are other issues. There will be conflicting, unreliable, out-of-date information, and the whole issue of reliability of the systems, availability, etc., will be critical. But the other aspect has to do with security, privacy, safety, and again, reliability and availability. The hacker issue is a major one in this context. And this is just to the major risks in this area. All of this leads to an issue that is very critical to IoT in general, which is liability. If something happens, who will be liable for the accident and the consequences? After this brief introduction to the vehicle as a smart moving thing, I would like to focus on another aspect that I think is even more important, is that the vehicles in general carry connected smart things and even people. People that bring with them their connected smart things, and this goes a little bit ad infinitum. If you remember that in the 90s, Docomo predicted that each person would carry with them up to 300 smart things, connected smart things, you can see what the impact will be. And this picture brings together then the car and the smartphone that comes with the driver in this case. And it is very clear that this needs to be integrated. And changing now the perspective from the focus on the vehicle to the focus on the driver again, on the people inside, I came up with, I saw this quote and I think it really clarifies the situation. In the IoT magazine, your connected vehicle is your largest wearable. Largest, more expensive, more complex, but certainly is your wearable. And this puts the car under your control. Whether it is your car or it's a rented car, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's something that should augment you. Not only the people augment the vehicle because the people bring with them their devices, their connectivity, but also the, the vehicle should augment the people. As the vehicle has a lot of sensors and a lot of equipment and a lot of interaction, these two systems need to be brought together. The problem is that there is an inherent tension between the business model of the connectivity providers and the business model of the automotive providers. So MNOs versus OEMs. And this tension, in some sense, is obviously somewhat positive, but certainly should not prevent people or limit people's access to things. Now focusing on the 5G for connected and augmented mobility. As I said, the whole point of 5G for CAM is to go beyond best effort. Currently, there are many applications that can already be provided with best effort access. In the 5G action plan, one of the main objectives was to have 5G in all urban areas and along main transport corridors by 2025. Okay, we will start with major cities in 2020. We have already, in fact, in most member states, in fact, more than one major city identified with 5G, but the objective is to cover all main transport corridors by 2025. And this is complicated because in many cases there is what it's called a mild market failure, i.e. the perspective of return on investment is very bad, and the likelihood of people willing to invest in remote rural areas is not very high. So the action plan calls for this coverage by 2025, but there are many things that need to be done. And in order to help with this, the Commission launched in 2018 a call on 5G for cooperative, connected, and automated mobility. And the objective was to accelerate the deployment of 5G in cross-border scenarios. Again, areas where there would be no business case and therefore deployment would not happen in general. 3 projects were launched in November 2018, 5G Croco, Carmen, and Movix, covering corridors, the first one between France, Luxembourg, and Germany. The second one, German, Austria, Italy, and the third one, Portugal, Spain, and Greece, Turkey. These they covered quietly distinct scenarios, and the combined budget is 63 million euros. They cover more than 1,000 kilometers of highways, and they cross 8 borders. So this is a rather comprehensive coverage with distinct scenarios to get a good sample of, let's say, the difficulties ahead. The objective was to provide seamless roaming of CAM services on top of other services. This implies that we need to provide roaming, namely at the cross borders, but this is a different kind of roaming. It's data roaming and roaming of critical data. This is very expensive. This is very expensive, and again, because of the mild market factor, it's not foreseen that this will be happen without some sort of help. The coverage of these sparsely populated areas to deliver high data rates and ultra reliable low latency communications is, as I said, extremely expensive, which raises the issue of how can we reduce the price, the costs, and it might be through sharing infrastructure, national roaming, or for example, using common infrastructure, local providers. But this cannot be done without pervasive fiber infrastructure. In order to provide these megabit per second per vehicle that are intended, you need fiber infrastructure along at least the major highways, which was already identified in the Gigabit Society package of 2016, which, by the way, also provided information on the funding gap that needs to be addressed. But again, I would like here to emphasize that providing these CAM services, these critical CAM services, requires real-time connectivity, and current deployments that are mostly 3G, a bit of 4G, cannot deliver this. Okay, so again, just the upgrade that is required for the current coverage is considerable, and here I'm not even talking about extending to areas where there is no coverage nowadays. So after this first call, we announced a second call, and for people that are paying attention, the first call was for 5G for CCAM, where we added the cooperative aspect, but now the second call was on CAM only, connected and automated mobility. We dropped the aspects of cooperative because of the understanding that, in fact, the major problem at the moment is to provide high quality connectivity. The cooperative aspects will come later, and they will be mostly addressed, in fact, by DG Move. As a result of this second call, we have now 4 projects that will be launched before the end of the year, maybe not in September, which represent another 40 million euros of investment. So overall, we have over 100 million euros of funding for these cross-border corridors, which are identified in this picture. So if you can see my slide, we have 5G Croco, 5G Mobix in these two areas, and 5G Carmen. And you know, we have in white the three new projects, here, here, and here. And there is another one on rail that will be kind of distributed across Europe. So these 7 corridors represent a substantive investment to look into the real issues in these areas. This investment that we did in the context of Horizon 2020 is to be continued now in the next framework program, which, as you know, is under discussion between the Council, the Parliament. There is a clear understanding that we need to continue the investment in the area of CAM to make Europe a leader in the deployment across Europe. The objectives are to enhance road safety, lower transport emissions, and reduce congestion. So this was well received in 2018. And the idea is to move from large-scale testing and pre-deployment in the context of Horizon 2020 with the 7 projects that I mentioned before, to a large-scale deployment in the context of the next framework program under the CEF2 digital, which will represent a substantive increase. So as I said, in Horizon 2020, we invested over 100 million euros. And the idea is that the public funding for the 5G corridors, cross-border corridors, will amount to, as it is mentioned here, a significant part of the 3 billion requested by the Commission. So first thing, this is the Commission proposal. It's not yet approved, but the idea is to have a substantial part of the 3 billion for CEF digital, which means in principle that we hope to get 1 billion for this. So from Horizon 2020 to CEF, we hope to increase one order of magnitude the investments. How are we preparing for this cross-border deployment? We know that without support, there will be a natural upgrade from 3G, 4G to 5G, but it will be very slow. It will not really pervade and will not go into these sparsely populated areas. But we want, with this CEF2 funding, to help and expedite this move so that, yes, by 2025, we hope to cover all main transport corridors. The issue is that we need to mix automotive traffic requirements, which will evolve in time and can be quite different in terms of megabits per second per vehicle, depending on the different class of services and on peak versus average coverage, with MNO or cellular non-CAM traffic. And then you need to add EMBB, massive machine type communication, which covers most of the IoT stuff, and other traffic. And when you add to this the road operator traffic, you have here a mix of traffics that need to be addressed with 5G and in general, and then CV2X in particular. To conclude, because I think I'm really getting there on time, there are many challenges. There are IoT-specific challenges. There are connectivity challenges, there are automotive challenges, there are regulatory challenges. And as I mentioned, there are certainly financing challenges. And financing challenges is not only to have the money for it, is to have the necessary authorizations so that you can fund uh, without without incurring on national funding, national subsidies. Again, this deployment does not come for free. In the context of a recent study, there is a funding gap of 250 billion euros just to provide broadband to rural areas. So if you add to this, which is a condition sine qua non, the investments needed to deploy the 5G in these rural areas, at least along the major highways, you can imagine the amount of money that is missing. But in order to make all this work, even if you have the funding, in order to address the challenges which are systemic in this regard, we need to bring together all the stakeholders involved. So the stakeholders need to cooperate, which means that the different business models, and remember that I talked about some tension between the automotive OEMs and the cellular MNOs, they need to be harmonized, and harmonized in the sense that they need to coexist and work together. There needs to be also institutional buy-in, not only because we anticipate some national funding, but there needs to be a roadmap at national level that brings also the institutional stakeholders, and I would mention it in particular the ministries of transportation into the picture. And on top of everything, there needs to be, because I'm talking about cross-border corridors, there needs to be coordination among member states and neighboring member states. One concrete example here, and you'll understand that is very critical, if you want to have continuity of service as you cross the border, there needs to be some sort of coordination among member states so that the same channel, the same 5G channel is used on both sides, or at least that they are very close to avoid a substantial interruption of service while you change to a new channel on the other side of the border. So this type of coordination is critical, and it's just another example of the level of cooperation that will be required across Europe. And with this, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, for this excellent presentation. Sorry, I've lost my voice. Matter of fact, the next keynote speakers cannot make it. He's stuck somewhere at an airport in Abu Dhabi, so we have more time. We'll have some questions after the two talks. Just in between, can you explain the concept of the CF1 and 2? Because it's not very known concept to many people.
Okay. No, I'm glad I'm glad you asked the question. CEF one, which is the Connected Europe Facility, provided already in the context of Horizon 2020 a lot of funding for a number of activities in transport, but also in connectivity. A concrete example was this initiative, Wi-Fi for Europe. Wi-Fi for Europe gave some small subsidies. We are talking about 40 to 60K to municipalities to deploy Wi-Fi in their areas. So it's a way to provide free Wi-Fi service in mostly rural areas. It was very successful. Again, it's not much money, but it was very successful because I think 90% of the European municipalities applied. I cannot tell you how many received, but many received this. Now, in the context of CEF2, in the next framework program, the objective is to continue with this focus on broadband deployment. Now, with a specific target on covering schools and hospitals, mainly in rural areas, but also move from this Wi-Fi for Europe to what it will be 5G for Europe. Okay, so we will help municipalities again to provide 5G coverage using small cells in these rural areas. So it will be slightly more money, but not much more money, because again, as is the focus is on this small cell coverage, we expect that the amounts will not be as significant as in a major city. But anyway, so this is what be one aspect. So 5G for Europe, and then a major investment specifically to cover these cross-border corridors. So 5G for cross-border corridors from in the Commission proposal would then get 1 billion euros, around 1 billion euros, to really cover all cross-border corridors across Europe. Okay, in a number of calls, because this will not be simple. As I said, the institutional involvement is needed. Coordination among the involved member states is also needed. So we will launch a series of calls. The idea is to launch a series of calls. Launch a series of calls so that we can start deploying across corridors with a focus on the cross-border segments.
So basically not to compete with the business case like in the cities and downtown.
Exactly. That's why, for example, the Wi-Fi for Europe, we would obviously not accept to provide this to a major capital. Okay, we give this to municipalities that they do not have their own coverage. So we obviously give priority to small villages and towns, mainly in rural areas. But there are many such municipalities. So for the 5G for Europe, we will not focus on major cities or big cities. We will focus exactly on the same rural, smaller cities.
Basically for developing regions of Europe. It's like developing countries within Europe. I think this is an excellent initiative which gives a lot of people new enthusiasm to take care of those that are not connected and have not in Europe. And I think this is an excellent initiative. Thank you very much, George. I hope you stay with us, because we will have a bit of time afterwards in order to have discussions and some questions from the audience. Thank you very much.